Hi, my beautiful kings and queens. Welcome back to my channel. So, kings and queens, your girl is back with another word today. In this season, I hear the Lord saying, God says that we must work on our inner self. He says that we must get our heart posture right. I hear the Lord saying that some of us are used to things being handed to us. A lot of us are used to people just giving they're all to us. But God says in this season, he says that you must get your heart right. He says, for he judges man by the heart, not by the works that he does, but by the heart. So God says that us ladies, we're gonna have to get our attitude right. God says that he says that a lot of us are mouthy. A lot of us, we like to snap back. But God says in this season of your life, he says that you're gonna have to hold your tongue. God says that you're gonna have to be wise in the spirit. He says that a fool is loose at the lips, but a wise man knows when to shut up. So God says, he says that you're going to have to keep your mouth shut in this season. He says that you're going to have to learn how to control those emotions, control your attitude. God says that you must get your heart in order. He says that in this season, he says that you cannot afford to miss your blessing. So kings and queens, God says you must get yourself in order. He says, for the Mark 8 says, what is it profit a man for him to gain the world but lose his soul? God says a lot of us are asking for blessings. A lot of us are asking for tangible things. But God says that we have not worked on our inner self. We have not worked on our heart posture. We have not worked on that attitude that we have. We have not worked on that jealousy that we have. So God says, he says, in order for him to bless you, in order for him to take you to the next level, God says you're going to have to work on your inner self. He says that you're going to have to sit down in that place. He said you're going to have to sit down and think about the things that you have done. God says that we must control our actions. He says every action doesn't need a reaction in this season. So I don't know who this word is for, but I hear the Lord saying, God says in this season, he says that we're going to have to take a look in the mirror and examine self. He says we're going to have to examine ourselves. A lot of us, we like to judge others for what they do, but God says, have you took a look at yourself? Have you examined the things that you do? Have you noticed that a lot of people don't want to be around you? Let's just be honest. A lot of us, we have a nasty attitude, and we wonder as to why we can't keep friends. We wonder as to why we always get into it with our mom, with our sister, with our family member. But God says that you must take a look at yourself. God says, he says, for we must love thy neighbor. God says, have you been loving your peers? Have you been loving the people amongst you? Have you been showing love? Because God is love. God will forever be love. Jesus, when he came down, he did not judge anyone. He brought in the sinners. He brought in the kings. He said, Jesus says that we must love thyself. He says that we must love thy neighbor as thyself. So have you been loving people like you love yourself, or have you been prejudging them based off their actions and the things that they do? Because God said, if we are going to be representation of the Christ, if we're going to be representation of Christ, we must lead by example. We must lead with dignity. We must lead with grace and mercy. God says that we must not judge others because we are all sinners. Just because you have decided, just because you're in this place right now and you have turned your life around, that doesn't mean that you didn't have a past. All of us have a past. We've all done something that was wrong. We have all sinned. But God says, he said that he destined for you to win. He destined for you to be the prophet, for you to be the mouthpiece for his kingdom. So God says that he doesn't want his people judging others. He doesn't want his people judging the people that are still of this world, but we must lead the people to Christ. We must lead them back to God. So in this season, kings and queens, we must get our heart posture right. We must get in alignment with who God says that we are. God says that you must stop judging people. That's why a lot of young folks have left church, because we have the sisters that sit in church. We have the deacons that sit in church. And when they see a young person walk in, they already prejudge him with their facial expressions. They already prejudge them before they even sit down. So that is why the young people are leaving the church, because the old folks, they are judging them, but they don't know. They had a past past before they became that deacon, before they became that pastor. They had a past too. So God says that we, as being a representation of Christ, we as being prophets, we cannot judge others. None of us are perfect, but God shows grace on us. He shows us mercy. So kings and queens, we must lead by example in this season. We must stop judging people based off their past. Stop judging people based off the actions and the things that they do, because that is going to draw them away from Christ. That is drawing them away from Jesus. That is drawing them away from what we are called to do. So I don't know who this word was for, but God says that you must get your heart posture right. He says that you mustn't. And then there's also the people that are jealous. God says that we must get rid of those jealous spirits, those envious spirits. God says just because you see someone else winning, just because you see that next person winning, he says that doesn't mean that you're not going to win. God says that right now just might not be your season to level up. But God says that thing is happening for you. He said it's going to happen if you stay obedient. God says that you must not be jealous of the next person, but you must stay focused on yourself. You must stay focused on your assignment and the thing that God has called you to do. So kings and queens, get yourself right with God, get in your word, and lead by example. God says that we must be the examples of the world because he has called us to lead. He has called us to be that bigger person. He has called us to be wise in the spirit, and he has called us to spread knowledge to his people, to spread knowledge to the world. So I love you all so much, kings and queens. And like I said, be wise and know that God is always watching. He sees all. He sees everything. So don't think you can get anything past God. But I love you all so much, kings and queens. And like I always say, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will be seeing you all in tomorrow's video. Bye, my kings and queens.